Preface. Ethereal Hollywood is a world reconfigured from the golden age of Hollywood, where the legendary stars are not just memories, but immortal archetypes, still living in their own parallel alternative reality. Familiar history is not duplicated but flexible and constantly revisioning itself along diverse pathways. Time and space are also more fluid and less binding. And what has been called magic works in odd and unusual ways, producing scenarios from the silly to the surreal. And since these stories are in an alternative world or dimension, there are variances from real-world facts, such as the relationship between characters, studios, events. This is a fluid world where history flows in unexpected directions. These are audiobooks with imagery synced to the narrative as much as possible, serving as quasi-storyboards to give a rough visual dimension to the stories. Pre-Code Autograph Magic. Book 16 of the Ethereal Hollywood series. By Arnold Kalnitsky. The universe of Ethereal Hollywood was painted in a perpetual magic hour. Its sun, a colossal Klieg light, hung low in a lavender sky, refusing to set, casting the world in a wash of gold and inky, dramatic shadows. Boulevards paved with shimmering celluloid stretched between Art Deco monoliths that scraped the perpetually twilight sky, each building a monument to cinematic grandeur. Palms, perfectly silhouetted, swayed with a rhythmic, almost choreographed grace, their fronds rustling like the turning pages of a script. Here, the stars of the Golden Age, burnished by the eternal glow of the Klieg sun, remained forever in their prime, their glamour undimmed, their legends continually replayed on the grand marquee of existence. It was into this shimmering, fantastical reality that the strangest of phenomena began to ripple, a whisper that turned into a murmur, then a full-blown cacophony across the soundstages and salons. It started subtly, a faint prickle, a momentary dizzy spell, a shiver that had nothing to do with the balmy air. Soon, it became clear. All the pre-code actresses were getting unusual feelings whenever someone, anyone, looked at their autographs. Barbara Stanwyck was the first to openly declare it. She was in her opulent dressing room, preparing for a scene that required her to look both world-weary and impossibly defiant. Her maid, a silent, efficient sprite, was polishing the silver frame of a signed portrait, a gift from a grateful fan. As the maid's gaze lingered on Stanwyck's bold signature, with the line cutting through her first letter, Barbara felt a sudden, inexplicable tremor deep in her stomach, a sensation akin to a particularly potent gin fizz bubbling up from within. It wasn't unpleasant, precisely, but it was certainly there. What in the blazes was that? She muttered, straightening her silk stocking with more force than necessary. The maid, oblivious, just smoothed a stray hair from the photograph. The feeling intensified, a curious warmth spreading through Stanwyck's chest, followed by a fleeting pang of something like longing. She narrowed her eyes. This was entirely too much. Across town, in her notoriously reclusive mansion, Greta Garbo felt it as an insidious crawl, a prickle of unseen eyes upon her very soul. She was in her sunroom, a sanctuary of shadows even in the eternal magic hour, attempting to lose herself in a particularly dense philosophical text. Her secretary, reviewing fan mail, paused over a meticulously preserved autograph on a faded program from Anna Christie. Instantly, Garbo felt 1,000 tiny needles prickling her skin, a profound sense of exposure, as if her innermost thoughts were being laid bare for public consumption. She shivered, pulling her shawl tighter, a rare flash of annoyance crossing her ethereal features. "Must you stare at that thing so?" she murmured, her voice a low, resonant thrum. The secretary, startled, merely blinked. Garbo longed to vanish, to dissolve into the very air she breathed. This was an intolerable invasion. Norma Shearer, ever the poised queen of MGM, experienced it as a subtle shift in the air around her, a gentle hum that resonated with her own magnificent presence. She was at a charity luncheon, signing programs for a line of adoring fans. Each time a fan's eye fell upon her elegant cursive, With the distinctive square N of her first name, Norma felt a surge of energy, a thrumming vitality that was both invigorating and slightly disorienting. Her smile, however, never faltered. She simply adjusted her pearl necklace, a hint of analytical curiosity flickering in her eyes. This was interesting. A new dimension to fan adoration, perhaps. She would have to observe it carefully. Joan Crawford, ever the meticulous planner, found herself both perturbed and intrigued. She was in a heated discussion with her director, her brow furrowed in concentration. On the wall above them, a framed photograph of her from Paid bore her distinctive signature, with a bold looping J, showing a confident flourish. As the director's gaze, momentarily distracted, fell upon it, Joan felt a sudden, almost magnetic pull in her abdomen, a distinct sensation of being observed, intensely and intimately. It was a jolt, sharp and demanding. She paused mid-sentence, her eyes widening slightly. Her immediate instinct was to channel it, to control it, to turn this peculiar energy into more drive, more power. What is this thing? And how can I make it work for me? Bette Davis, fiery and indomitable, was in the middle of a particularly scathing monologue on set when she felt it. A prop master, admiring a vintage lobby card he'd just retrieved, stared at her signature with a wistful grin. Bette suddenly experienced a sensation like a tiny, insistent hand tapping her on the shoulder, demanding attention. It was irritating, intrusive, and profoundly distracting. Her eyes blazed. What in hell was that? She barked, breaking character and causing the entire crew to jump. Stop gawking at my name like some lovesick puppy. It's a signature, not a mirror to your soul. Her indignation was palpable. Not all reactions were of annoyance or analysis. For Mae West, it was a delightful, often quite stimulating, experience. Lounging on a chaise longue, her famed curves draped in shimmering satin, she watched her personal assistant sort through fan mail. As the young man paused, blushingly, over a particularly saucy signed portrait, Mae felt a delicious warmth spread through her, a tingling that started at her toes and worked its way up, a genuine, pleasurable hum. She winked. Why, hello there, handsome, she purred, though she wasn't speaking to the assistant. Glad you're enjoying the view, sugar. She found it quite invigorating, a reaffirmation of her potent allure. Clara Bow, the vivacious, girl, found it exhilarating. She was at a bustling studio commissary, laughing boisterously with friends. A young starlet, just starting out, clutched a signed photograph of Clara, gazing at it with wide-eyed adoration. Clara felt an explosion of effervescent joy, a dizzying rush of energy that made her want to dance on the tabletops. It was like feeling all the love and excitement of her fans directly, a direct current of vibrant adoration. She bounced in her seat, feeling even more alive, more than usual. Woo-hoo! She shrieked, totally unbothered by the sudden surge of sensation. That's how you know you're loved, baby. Ginger Rogers, ever graceful, found it a gentle, surprising flutter. She was practicing a new dance routine, her movements fluid and precise. A stagehand, admiring her technique, glanced at an old playbill signed by her. Ginger felt a sudden, delicate warmth bloom in her chest, a feeling like 1,000 tiny butterflies taking flight. It wasn't distracting, but it was certainly distinct, a soft reassurance. She paused, a questioning tilt to her head, then resumed her steps, a slight, bewildered smile playing on her lips. Anne Dvorak, intense and often melancholic, found the sensations overwhelming. She was quietly reading, seeking solace in the written word, when a passing studio executive paused by her office door, idly looking at a signed publicity photo. Anne was instantly flooded with a dizzying array of emotions, a surge of ambition, a flicker of envy, a wave of paternalistic admiration, all projected from the executive's mind straight into her own. It was too much, a barrage of foreign feelings that left her feeling drained and disoriented. She put a hand to her temple, a faint tremor running through her. It felt like her privacy was utterly gone. Katherine Hepburn, ever the individualist, dismissed it with a characteristic wave of her hand. She was on a soundstage, supervising the construction of a particularly complex set. An autograph hound, having snuck onto the lot, held up a crumpled piece of paper bearing her tight, somewhat scrawled signature. Katherine felt a brief, annoying tickle behind her eyes, a fleeting sense of expectation. She scowled. "Nonsense," she declared, more to herself than anyone, then promptly ignored it, redirecting her attention back to the set design with fierce determination. It was an inconvenience, nothing more, and she refused to grant it any power. As the peculiar phenomenon spread, becoming a daily occurrence for the pre-code sirens, the industry buzzed with theories. Gossip columnists like Hedda Hopper and Luella Parsons, usually adept at ferreting out secrets, were utterly stumped. "The stars are feeling things, dearies." Hedda shrieked into her phone, "physical sensations, mental images. All from their John Hancocks." Luella, ever Hedda's rival, countered with whispers of psychic connection and auric transference. Kay Francis, always impeccably dressed and composed, found the whole affair rather charmingly absurd, albeit a slight nuisance. "One can hardly enjoy one's gin Ricky without feeling a sudden urge to tap dance, darling," she quipped to Constance Bennett over martinis. Constance, ever the shrewd businesswoman, raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "Perhaps we should charge extra for interactive autographs," she mused, swirling the olive in her glass. "A premium for the personal touch, as it were." Dorothy Mackaill, joining them, confessed, "I feel like I'm constantly on the verge of fainting, or perhaps a sudden burst of inappropriate laughter. It's dreadfully discombobulating." The studios, initially baffled, eventually saw potential. Sam Goldwyn famously declared, "We'll call it sensory cinema. The fans won't just see the star, they'll feel them." Experts were summoned. Mystics with crystal balls, scientists with elaborate contraptions of wires and dials, dream interpreters with Jung's latest works. None could offer a coherent explanation beyond vague pronouncements about collective unconscious, or astral projections of celebrity aura. The actresses themselves, despite their varied initial reactions, began to connect. Informal gatherings, initially covert, became more open. They shared observations, comparing notes on the peculiar flavors of their autograph-induced sensations. "When a young man with stars in his eyes looks at my signature," Clara Bow explained, "I feel like a Roman candle exploding. All fizz and pop. Whereas when an old crone, clutching a tattered program, stares at mine," Bette Davis grumbled, "I feel a distinct itch behind my left ear, and a sudden urge to slap someone." "And I, darling," Mae West purred, "find it depends entirely on the intent of the admirer. Some are rather enthusiastic." She fanned herself languidly. Greta Garbo, though she rarely attended these interventions, found herself increasingly disturbed. The sensations became more specific, more intrusive. When a particularly ardent fan gazed at her simple signature, she felt a burning ache of longing, a profound sadness that was not her own. It threatened to shatter her carefully constructed solitude. She considered abandoning all public appearances, but even her old contracts carried her signature. There was no escape. The autograph anomaly, as the press dubbed it, reached its zenith during the grand premiere of Love, Honor, and Oh Boy, a particularly scandalous pre-code melodrama starring Joan Blondell and Warren William. The celluloid boulevard was awash with a sea of fans, each clutching programs, photographs, and scraps of paper, desperate for a signature. The air thrummed with anticipation. Joan Blondell, radiating charm and wit, was signing tirelessly. Each stroke of her pen, each glance at her name, sent a ripple of playful energy through her. But tonight, it was different. As the crowds surged, the focus intensified. When a particularly excitable fan, directly beneath her, stared at her scribbled signature with almost manic glee. Joan felt an inexplicable giddiness overwhelm her, a wild, uncontrollable urge to kick up her heels and burst into song, right there on the red carpet. She giggled, a little too loudly, and had to lean on Warren William for support. Then, as the spotlight shifted to Barbara Stanwyck, who was making her way regally down the carpet, a collector in the front row, holding a limited edition signed poster, focused on her name with an almost obsessive reverence. Barbara felt a sudden, violent lurch in her gut, a wave of profound, desperate yearning that was so intense it stole her breath. It was a sensation of raw ambition, of clinging to success with every fiber of one's being. She stumbled, her composure momentarily shattered, her eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and a strange, dawning recognition. This wasn't just vague sensing. This was an echo, a feeling reflected. Suddenly, a theory, whispered initially by Norma Shearer, began to coalesce. "These aren't our feelings, entirely," she declared, her voice ringing clear above the hubbub, her regal presence commanding attention. "They are the feelings of those who look at our names. Their hopes, their dreams, their anxieties, projected onto the very essence of our celebrity." A hush fell over the gathered actresses backstage. It was Katherine Hepburn who, despite her initial dismissal, pieced the final puzzle together, her sharp mind cutting through the whimsical chaos. "And why us?" she demanded, turning to the collective. "Why the pre-code girls? Why not the ingenues, the studio glamour pusses of today?" It was Mae West, with a languid drag of her feather boa, who offered the most profound, and perhaps the most ethereal Hollywood, explanation. "Because, darlings," she purred, "we were the ones who truly lived it. Before the censors, before the code locked everything away in neat little boxes, we were raw. We were real. We were scandalous, we were daring, we were every fantasy and every nightmare. We bared our souls, our desires, our very selves for the camera, and for the world to see. Our signatures," Joan Crawford added, a slow, understanding smile spreading across her face, "are not just our names. They are the indelible mark of what we represented. Unfiltered emotion, untamed ambition, unapologetic sensuality." Barbara Stanwyck nodded slowly, the lingering echo of that desperate yearning still in her chest. "They're not just looking at a name. They're looking at the promise of what we were. And in ethereal Hollywood, where the magic is always just a breath away, that promise has found a way to resonate back." The understanding settled upon them, a strange, beautiful truth. Their autographs were not mere marks on paper. They were conduits, reflections of the adoration, the aspirations, the projections of their fans. They were living, breathing extensions of their own star power, imbued with the potent, unbridled spirit of the pre-code era. From that day forward, the autograph anomaly transformed from a bewildering mystery into a peculiar, often delightful, aspect of life in ethereal Hollywood. Some, like Mae West and Clara Bow, embraced it fully, reveling in the direct, visceral connection with their admirers. Clara would sign with extra flourish, feeling the surging joy of her fans as a constant source of effervescence. Mae West would lean in, her eyes twinkling, often delivering a pithy one-liner that perfectly matched the sensation she was receiving. Others, like Greta Garbo, learned to erect stronger mental barriers, developing a kind of psychic filter to protect her solitude, though not without effort. She learned to decipher the difference between genuine admiration and mere curiosity, allowing only the purest sentiments to penetrate her elusive calm. And Dvorak, too, learned to manage the influx, finding a way to channel the chaotic emotions into her intense performances, lending them even greater depth. Bette Davis continued to grumble, but even she found a grudging respect for the phenomenon. "It's a blasted nuisance," she'd snarl, "but at least it proves they're looking at my work, not just my pretty face." She even found that the prickles of annoyance often spurred her to even more fiercely brilliant performances. Joan Crawford, ever the strategist, learned to subtly gauge the mood of a room by the collective hum emanating from her signed memorabilia. She could feel the admiration, the envy, the aspirations of her peers and fans, using it to refine her public persona, to craft her every move with even greater precision. Barbara Stanwyck, while still preferring practical reality, found a surprising depth in the experience. The echoes of longing and ambition from her fans reminded her of her own journey, fueling her fierce drive and empathy for the human condition, which she poured back into her roles. And Katherine Hepburn, while still maintaining her sardonic distance, found it impossible to completely ignore. The subtle whispers of admiration, the fleeting sense of respect that emanated from a glance at her signature, occasionally brought a rare, almost imperceptible softening to her fiercely independent gaze. Ethereal Hollywood continued its perpetual magic hour, its Klieg sun casting long, dramatic shadows. But now, beneath the shimmering celluloid boulevards and the Art Deco grandeur, there was a new, unseen layer of connection. The stars of the pre-code era, those pioneers of the untamed screen, had unwittingly forged a new bond with their audience, a magical conduit that spoke not just through flickering images, but through the very power of a name, eternally etched, forever felt. And in a world built on dreams and illusion, what could be more real than the touch of 1,000 unseen hearts?